Thank you, Angie. It's so wonderful to be here this morning on this rainy day. And I appreciate that introduction. And yes, Elizabeth is on the call. I'm not going to call her out on this, but she's on the call in case I happen to miss anything. And I'm going to encourage each of you, by the way, to ask questions. If I'm saying something that you would like a little bit more a deep dive on, please just put the question in there, and I'm sure that Clay will pick that up. So I'm going to start with that picture. And this is where we start with this presentation today, because this is where we all want to be, I'm assuming, when we're in our retirement years. And you know, it does not look the way it does outside right now. And Angie, I'm not in Bethany right now, unfortunately. I'm actually here at home in Baltimore, at my Baltimore office. And I'm sort of glad, because I wouldn't want to be in Bethany right now. But this is the end point right here. And this may be my end point, but one of the homework assignments that each of you is going to have is to sit down over the next few days and just envision what your end point would look like during your retirement. What do you want it to look like? It could be that you never want to stop working. It could be you want to spend it at the beach. It could be you want to volunteer. But you need to start with that end point in mind. So that's how we're starting this presentation, is with this end point. And when we talk to people about financial planning, we start with the end point and then pull back to where you currently are. So you say, okay, I want to be there at this date. That's important too. And I'm now here. I need to get there. What do I have to do to get there? So identifying that starting point is really, really important. And what I'm going to do is pull up right here. This is a worksheet that's called Know Where You Are. Can you see that? Yes, you do see it? Okay, thanks, Clay. And this is 6 simple questions that I would like each of you to think. I'm not taking score on this, by the way, but it's important.
Sorry,
yes,
actually, I see the PDF down in the corner there, but did you click on it to open it up?
No, I did click on it, but I'm gonna now share it, okay? Okay, how am I gonna, oh my gosh. Look at all the, okay, I'm gonna back up here, guys. I'm so sorry. Now can you see that?
No, now we see you.
Now you see me. I'm so sorry,
yeah,
guys.
it was, no, sweetie, you're doing great. It was on the screen. Clay, do you have any suggestions?
Okay, share screen. I got it right here. There you go. I'm a financial planner, not an IT.
There we go. We can see it now. Great. And we can provide this worksheet to everybody at the conclusion of this as an attachment to the email.
And I'm going to be repeating this later in the presentation as well. So these are 6 simple questions. I don't expect for you guys to give me answers to these, but these are important questions for each of you individually to know. The first question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, I have a written inventory of my assets and liabilities that is complete and up to date on a scale of 1 to 10. Number 2, I'm satisfied with the amount of money that I'm currently saving and investing on a scale of 1 to 10. On number 3, I am confident that the insurance I have would adequately protect me if I need it. Number 4, I have a will and an estate plan that is complete and up to date. Number 5, I communicate regularly and effectively with my spouse or partner about my money, if applicable. And number 6, I am confident that my investment plan is allocated in a way that's appropriate for my goals. So you can have a total of 60 points here. And I'm not suggesting that anyone here is actually going to do that. I'm going to see if I can do this. I'm going to go back to the presentation now, guys. Share screen. Oh, this one right here. Because that's your starting point. And those 6 questions, by the way, are so important that that's the foundation for this talk this morning, okay? So understand that those are all important, and I'm going to start right off the bat with your net worth. And just to be more efficient here, I'm not going to click on that net worth calculator, but it is basically a balance sheet for each of you individually. And what this means, if you guys are in your business, you probably know what we're talking about here, but I'm going to just repeat it for those who might not be familiar. But a balance sheet is a snapshot of what you own, what your worth is, sometimes called net worth. And on one side, you list out everything that you own, whether it's your investment accounts, your bank accounts, cash in the bank. If you happen to have life insurance that has a cash value, your home, your business, these are things that you own. Offsetting that would be your liabilities, and that's what you owe. That could be your home, your home mortgage, student debt, car loans, credit card debt, and things like that. And what you come up with at the end, when you take all those assets and subtract all your liabilities, you end up with your net worth. And that's a really important number to be tracking year after year. And I can't even tell you what a great feeling it is year after year to look at this and see how your net worth is growing because you're doing the right kind of planning. You may not recognize it right now when you're looking at it, but when you look back at it, you'd say, man, look at the progress I've made. And remember that picture we did, the very first picture, that's the end game here. Oh my goodness, okay. So here we go. This is, in terms of the liabilities that you have good debt and bad debt. Good debt would be a mortgage because you're saving for your house and you're paying it down. That's something you own that you're actually able to use. In fact, even good debt could be your car because you need your car to go to work and things like that, theoretically these days. Student loans because you're improving yourself to get a better job. But there's also bad debt. And an example of bad debt, and at the top of the list, would be credit card debt. Credit card debt is prevalent across the board. I don't even want to think about asking how many people on this call have credit card debt, because if I had to guess, I would say that a large majority would have credit card debt. Having said that, where credit cards are amazing in terms of you don't have to be carrying around cash with you, you don't have to be writing checks out. It can make you go backwards very quickly unless you pay it off every single month. And sometimes that is hard to do, and the interest rate that they charge on that can be extremely high. Sometimes you can get these intro rates where you can, they'll say 0% interest for the first 6 months or for the first year and whatnot. But more likely, you're going to be paying interest that could be 5, 10, 15, 20. I've seen it as high as 29%. And that's really difficult to climb out of that. So debt and a liability and a debt is not necessarily bad as long as it's the right kind of debt. And I would encourage you to put on the top of your to-do list to start chipping away at credit card debt. And one way to do that would be to take an inventory of all your credit cards, what your current balances are, and what the interest rates they're charging on each one of those, and then you just slowly chip away at that. Okay. Credit scores. So credit, it's important to have a strong credit score because it helps you when you're taking out a car loan and a home mortgage and things like that. So it's important to protect your credit. And how do you do that? Over here, there's a little box, paying your bills on time, paying off collection amounts. It does not necessarily remove them from your report. So you don't want to have too many credit cards open, but you don't want to go through and just start closing everything. Because if you do that, you may have some credit cards you've had open for many, 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 many years that have a great credit history. And that credit history is what is your evidence that you pay your bills on time. And paying your bills on time is what gives you a higher credit score. There is a rule of thumb here that you don't want to max out all your balances. So for example, if one of your credit cards says that they're going to give you a credit line of $10,000, then you may not want to say, okay, I'm going to run that up to $10,000 because I have that much to spend. You may want to keep it within $2,000, keep it within 20%. So ideally, you want to have your credit score be above 750, and that's going to help you at a time when you're going out and looking for loans. And now's a great time to be looking for loans, by the way, because interest rates are are crazy low, as you can see. So you want to have yourself positioned so that you can grab these loans if you need them for purchasing a new house, for example. Another thing to think about, and I know you guys had a trust talk on this, I think it was last week from Kat Sabosh on budgeting, but budgeting is simply spending less than you make. And that sounds really simple. It is not as simple as it sounds. And what it's interesting, someone could make, you know, $50,000 and someone can make $200,000, and believe it or not, they all struggle with trying to figure this one out. So it's hard to do. So one way to do it is to just look at your take-home pay on your pay stub and look at that and say, okay, this is how much I have to spend every month. What are my expenses? And we suggest that you go through and, you know, literally, I have a budget, and I love my budget. I have to admit, it drives my husband crazy, but I do love my budget because it keeps me on track. And not that I care how much I spend on groceries necessarily, but I do care about how much I have to spend and making sure that I stay within that. Why is that? Because if you do that and you have discretionary money at the end, then you can pay off some of those debts and you can save more for retirement. So that's why it's so important to do this. And I don't have this in here as a budgeting worksheet, but there are those out there on the internet. There are lots of resources out there that you can just click on, and you can just literally, you know, mark down on there how much we spend on groceries, how much on gasoline for the car, how much for the mortgage or for rent, et cetera, et cetera. And then if you see you're going negative, you go, oh my gosh, it's because we are spending too much on clothing or spending too much on going to the movies. I will say that as crazy as this year is and how just devastating this year has been economically, probably most of us have noticed that our spending has gone down. And it's because we can't go out to dinner like we did, and we don't go to the movies, and we're not traveling and things like this. But this is important to do. Okay, so this is a question of what keeps you up at night. You wake up in the middle of the night because, oh my gosh, I'm worried. So these are 4 typical areas that we see that people worry about. The first area on the left is financial independence. And that would be, you know, I'm worried that I'm going to run out of money before my retirement ends. The second one is investment planning. And that is, I'm invested, but I don't know if I'm invested the right way. The third is estate planning. Are my assets going where they need to be? Do I have everything in place in case something happens to me? And fourth is business succession. What happens to my business? I'll be talking this morning about those first 3. I will not be talking about business succession because it is such a comprehensive area. That's an issue in and of itself. So I'm going to jump right into financial independence here. And financial independence is, just as I said here, it's I want to have my same current lifestyle during retirement and not worry about running out of money. So how do I do that? Well, one thing to ask is, how much money do I even need to have for retirement? Well, this is a crazy number. And you know, if you think about it, we go back to that budget and what your expenses are. Let's just say for fun that your expenses are $80,000 a year. That's what you need to live on. Well, then how much money do you have to have in the bank at retirement to cover those expenses? Well, the rule of thumb here is that you really don't want to pull out more than 4% of your investment account, because if you do, you could risk invading the principal, and then you could perhaps run out of money. So a rule of thumb is try not to go more than 4%. Well, 4% of what number will give you 80,000? That's $2 million. Sounds like a huge number. So if my expenses now are 80,000 and I expect that's going to be 80,000 in retirement, how much do I need to have at retirement? $2 million. So how in the world do I get there? Well, you get there by starting to save right now. And You do that through contributing. Most people do it by contributing to their retirement plan. So I'm just going to jump into that for a second here. When you're contributing to a retirement plan, such as a 401k, 403b, one of these through your employer, typically that's considered paying yourself first. And the reason they say it that way is because you're paying yourself before Uncle Sam takes taxes out. So let's say, for example, you're contributing $1. Well, you're going to contribute that dollar, but if you did it, if you just were putting that in a regular savings account, then you get it from your paycheck, you're not going to get $1. 25%, perhaps, whatever your tax bracket is going to the federal IRS, and perhaps another 7.5% or so is going to your state tax. So maybe 2/3 of that is going into savings. However, if you are putting it into a 401k, a simple IRA, a SEP IRA, any of these types of retirement plans, then you're going to put in that full dollar. So that's what we are saying here. You want to pay yourself first before Uncle Sam takes out the taxes. And then here's the question. It's a crazy question. How much should you save? And you know, it's a big number. For women, 18% of your gross income. For men, 10%. Crazy numbers here. Why the difference? Well, for women, women would need to save more because typically they are in retirement for a longer period of time than men, about 20% longer. They typically have a longer lifespan, and therefore there are more years that are required to have funding there. On top of that, often, not always, but often, women take some time out during the course of their adult life to care for other family members, whether it's children or parents or whatever. Not always, but sometimes they do. And when they do, then those years would be fewer years for them to be contributing to retirement, contributing to their Social Security, and just saving overall. Men need to save a total of 10% of their gross income. So how are you doing that? How are you doing that? You can do that through employer, through your 403b, your 401k, and through employer contributions. So I'm going to jump past this for 1 second. I'll come back to it and talk about Social Security, because that is going to be an issue for many of us on this call. I would love to say it's going to be an issue for all of us, but let's go back to that $80,000 example again. You know, I was saying you need $2 million if you have expenses of $80,000 when you start out in retirement. But the reality is that's not your only income. You might have a pension from your employer. Most employers don't offer pensions anymore, but some do. But in addition to that, you have Social Security. And so if you had Social Security, for example, that was paying $30,000, then you maybe only need $50,000 from your retirement account, which means now you only need to save $1,250,000. So the big question is, where is Social Security? Is it still going to be there? We do believe it's going to be there, and of course we've had some headwinds this year, especially because of so much funding going out for to combat the economy from COVID-19. And perhaps, you know, we don't know. Reality is we don't know, but perhaps interest taxes will go up next year. Perhaps Social Security will be impacted somehow. Maybe they will delay when you can start taking it. Maybe they will reduce it slightly. Maybe the Social Security tax will go up. We don't know those, but we do know that is a player here in terms of your income when you're in retirement. So you might want to think about that second big bullet down there. Have a nest egg large enough so that you're not dependent on it, especially for those of you on the call that are in the younger generations. And I can look right here at Elizabeth, because I would love to say, Elizabeth, that you would be right there getting Social Security. We just don't know if it's going to be like it is now, or if it's going to be something maybe a little bit different than that. But Social Security is a player during retirement. It just can't be avoided. Okay, now here we go. So so I have extra money. I have my income coming in, and I've pulled out my expenses, and I've paid my rent, and I've bought the groceries, and I've put shoes on the kids, and I have money left over. Where do I put the money? So one of the things we're going to suggest is an emergency account. That's going to be one of the top things on your list. If you don't have an emergency account, we're going to recommend that you open one up as soon as you can. An emergency account is, just as the name implies, it's money to have on the side just in case there's an emergency. So for example, we have this terrible storm today. Suppose someone they lost some trees in their yard. From my understanding, insurance will cover, and if there's someone on the call that knows more about this insurance, they may want to chip in on this, but insurance will cover damage caused by a tree that falls on a house. But insurance, for example, doesn't cover removing the tree itself. It's things like that. So we have this big rain, we may have trees going down, and you may need money to come remove the trees. Suppose you lost your job. There are a number of people that have been impacted with this spring with the shutdown of businesses and pulling back. And, you know, it's times like that you need to be able to look on the side and say, but I have an emergency account, and that's what we have it for. So how much do you put in there? Typically, we'll say 3 to 6 months to go into this savings account, this emergency account. And that's pretty much of a range there. What is 3 to 6 months of what? Of your living expenses. 3 to 6 months of your living expenses. And why 3 to 6 months? The question is, if you lost your job, how long do you think it would take you to get another job comparable to that? If it's 3 months, then you need to have 3 months set aside in your emergency account. If it's 6 months, you need to have 6 months. But whatever that number is, that number needs to go set aside in a savings account. It should not be commingled in your checking account. It should not be in with your vacation savings. It should not be with your savings for college. It should not be in your investment account. It should be safely put away on the side, and you're not going to earn much interest from it, I have to say, but that's okay because it's going to be there. So think of it this way, in just a comical way, in a humorous way. This emergency account will not make you popular at a cocktail party, because you can't walk around and say, oh my gosh, look at what I've made in interest on my emergency account, because you're not going to make much. But I have to tell you, there's a reassurance there that you cannot put any kind of price on. What else do you do with discretionary income? You put it into your 401k, and a 401k is your one type of employer retirement plan. 401k, 403b, they're all very similar. And just go back up there. And the way that works is you contribute a certain amount. This year, let's see, this year the cap is $19,500. You don't have to put in $19,500 if you're under the age of 50. If you're over 50, it goes up to $26,000. But whatever, that's the maximum you can put in. And typically, your employer will match a certain portion of it. It might be 3%, it might be 4%. But whatever it is, we want to encourage you, first of all, to do what you can to max out to put as much as you can into your retirement, because you saw those numbers early on that you have to try and hit. So the second thing is, if you can't put that much in, which most people honestly can't, then contact your HR department and find out what is the company match, because you definitely want to put in that much if possible. For example, let's say it's 3%. Then you want to put in 3% of your income into that, because your employer will match that. That's free money that you're just giving away if you don't do that. So that's a way to double your money immediately when you start. Okay, and then Roth and traditional IRAs, those are also, we'll talk about that and more in just a second. So let me go back up here. We also have these other accounts. If you have children, you may want to start saving for college, because college is very expensive these days, and actually it may be changing, you know, because The way that colleges are looking in the fall and in the subsequent years, we don't know what those numbers are going to be. But we do know that right now it's expensive. And it can be devastating to a household to try and figure out how to pay for college. One way to pay for college is to take a college loan. Another way is to start with a college savings plan, such as a 529 plan or something like that. And if you do that, you know, you can just start putting money in when they're younger, and it grows, and you can pull it out. You pull it out tax-free. So any of the growth. So that's the kind of thing that you want to be thinking of in terms of what to do with discretionary money. But now I'm going to jump back again to these retirement accounts. These are all the kind of retirement accounts we're talking about. The 401k and the 403b, we talked about those. The 401k, by the way, is what corporations have. A 403b is what a nonprofit has, the comparable to a nonprofit. A simple IRA is what you may find with smaller employers. The contribution limits are less, but they're still significant. A simple IRA, it looks like this year is $13,500. A SEP IRA, if you are self-employed, that would be an option. And then and then a Roth IRA or a tax-deductible IRA, these two right here. Let's spend a minute talking about those two. If you have extra money, then, if you have extra money at the end of the year, you may want to put money into one of these IRAs. In fact, you may already have from some other time a traditional IRA set up somewhere or a Roth IRA. But let me tell you the difference between these, because they are really, really, really powerful. Okay, so if you put money into a traditional IRA, as you put it in there, it operates very similar to a 401k. The contributions go in before you pay tax on it, and they grow tax deferred until you take them out. You are required to start taking them out at age 72. That term right there, RMD, stands for Required Minimum Distribution. That's a requirement by the IRS at age 72. They tell you when to start taking money out of your 401k or your IRA. If you don't take that much out, the penalty is 50% of what you were supposed to take out. So you definitely don't want to miss that. But it grows tax deferred. The Roth IRA is a little bit, it seems similar, but it's very different. Those contributions go in after tax. So you don't get any tax break on that. With the traditional IRA, if you put in $5,000, you get to write $5,000 off on your income taxes. You save taxes. The Roth, there's no benefit on that. You put $5,000 in, you feel $5,000. You get no tax break. However, this entire account grows tax-free until you take this out. So how powerful is that? Well, let's do this. There's a concept in the financial circles called the Rule of 72. And the Rule of 72 says if you have an account that grows at 7% a year, then it should theoretically double every 10 years. It's just a generality. But let's take a look at this. Let's suppose you have a traditional IRA that you had $10,000 in. And you got to save money right up front on taxes. And that's awesome. It's like, man, we saved money on our taxes this year because we contributed to our IRA. And that's a very good thing. However, that account, let's say you were 30 years old and you had $10,000 in there. Well, think about this. By the time you're 40, it's worth $20,000. By the time you're 50, it's worth $40,000. By the time you're 60, it's worth $80,000. By the time you're 70, it's worth $160,000. Did I get those numbers right? I think I got those right. So you went from $10,000 to $160,000, and now you've saved taxes on $10,000. But by the time you start to pull the money out, you're now pulling out on $160,000 and paying tax on that. The Roth IRA, on the other hand, you put the $10,000 in, and granted, you didn't get to save any tax money that first year. However, it grew from $10,000 to $20,000 to $40,000 to $80,000 to $160,000. And guess what? You get to take out $160,000 tax-free. Now, that's just one example of what happens here with $10,000. Imagine if you were putting in, $5,000 a year, every year, and so forth. So it's a very powerful thing to do. And by the way, some 401k plans even offer a Roth option. So it's something to think about. It's something to think about. It's not that that you just do it without consultation with your CPA. They definitely need to run the numbers and make sure it makes sense for you. But if it does make sense, it would be something to seriously think about. And this is the time value of money. So this is an example here of if you started saving when you were younger as opposed to saving when you were 40 years old or something like that. You want to try and save early because that time value of money is what's going to get you there faster. So here you go. How do you build $1 million by the age of 65? So here's some examples based on time value of money. So if you had, if you were starting at age 20, all you'd have to do is put in $1,900 a year. This is assuming 7% growth up until age 65. You put $1,900 a year. Then by this age 65, you'd have somewhere around $1 million. Crazy. If you wait though till you're 30, then you'd have to put in $4,635 a year. If you wait till you're age 40, that increases to $11,800. And by the time, if they go, oh my gosh, I'm 50, man, I better start saving for retirement. Well, you're going to have that kind of road ahead of you, of saving about $34,000 a year in order to have $1 million by age 65. So that shows you here, again, the time value of money and the importance of starting early. Okay. What stands in your way? What is it that could keep you from having success in financial independence during retirement? College money, college expenses, long-term care expenses, a premature death, or disability. Let's just talk about these for a couple minutes here. College saving, we talked a little bit about that. Start saving early, just put a little bit in there if you can. One thing that I have seen some people do is grandparents, and instead of when the kids have their birthdays, and in fact I do this, I said with my first grandson when he was born, I said to my kids, for their birthday, I want you to send me a list of things that he would love to have, and my budget is about $25. And they're like, really? I'm like, that's it. My budget is $25. And you know what? You can get really cute things for $25 that if you spend $200, they're gonna love it just as much as something $200 that they may forget about. So what I do is I just get them something like that. I wrap it up, and then whatever I was going to spend on their birthday or on their holiday gift, I just put it into their 529 plan. So it just helps. Anything will help in terms of saving for college here, starting early. Life insurance is another thing that can derail you. Premature death. And here's how we feel about life insurance. If your death would create a hardship to anyone else, that's when you need to have life insurance. So for example, if you have a family and your children are very young, then you probably are going to want you will need life insurance in case something happened to you, to be able to raise them so you don't have to sell the house and to get them through college and things like that. So that would be typically a term life insurance policy. It's more affordable, and some people do it and they'll say, okay, my mortgage is a 30-year mortgage. I'm going to do a 30-year term insurance policy and things like that. So those are the kinds of things. Life insurance, if your death would cause a hardship to someone else, or if you see that you have an enormous estate tax burden facing your estate at your death, then that may be a reason for life insurance as well. But typically we're seeing people, especially people that are younger with families, purchasing term life insurance to get them through their period until their family and their mortgages are complete. Interestingly, more people become disabled than they do die prematurely. And so what we would suggest here is taking a look at purchasing disability insurance. If your employer does not offer this, then this is something you want, because if you become disabled, then you're unable to work, and there goes your income. Disability insurance will pay you a portion of that, so that will be you'll be able to keep your expenses covered. Long-term care. Long-term care is crazy expensive these days, and we just don't even like to think about it. But I will tell you that here, just in the state of Maryland, an average nursing home private room last year, 2019, averaged $125,000 a year. So you can imagine how devastating that would be on someone. So the question is, how do they pay for that? If they ended up having to go into a nursing home, how's it paid for? Well, one way is that you write a check for it, but maybe you don't have the money to write a check for it. A second way is for Medicaid to cover it. Well, for Medicaid, you need to deplete your assets before they'll cover it. And third would be to purchase long-term care insurance, and that's something to think about. We typically think about that. We start thinking about that around age 50, and it's just something to explore, to say, we just need to cover this and make sure we know what our plan is in the event that we have this issue facing us. It's also something, by the way, that you may want to talk to your parents about. If you're younger and you have parents, you just so that they are thinking ahead on this, because it's really expensive, can be. Okay, next question here is, this is how to invest your nest egg. And I did tell you here what this rule of 72 is, and here's Kelly here. She contributed. She has a 401k worth $50,000. She's 30 years old, and this is that same example. At age 40, it's worth 100. Age 50, 200, 60, 400, 70, 800, and that's what we're talking about. That's the importance of starting young, as early as you can, to do that. Then what do I do with it? How do I invest this? Our mantra is diversification, diversification, diversification. And here's our analogy. Suppose this is a broken window. Actually, speaking of the beach, we actually have one of these at the beach. A golf ball went into our window and it just smashed the whole thing. But suppose you're living in a neighborhood street, and there's a little boy playing baseball across the street and in the little play area there, and he hit a baseball, and it went into your window and it smashed your window. Well, if you have a plate glass window in your living room, it's going to break the entire window. On the other hand, if you replace that with individual panes in that big window, then only that little small pane would be the one you'd have to replace. And that's sort of the analogy with diversification, in that, you know what, you diversify. You have some in bonds, and you have some in international, and some in large cap, which is large companies, and some in small companies, and you diversify across all these asset classes, so that if one of those areas performs poorly, it doesn't crash your entire plan. Now, that of course says, well, then what do we do? How much do I put in international, and how much do I put in bonds? And I don't even know where to go with that. If I have $100,000, then how do I divide that up? That is a sophisticated question to ask, and there's not one size fits all. Everyone on this call probably is going to have a different kind of profile. So that is a question you need to talk to your investment advisor about. Have them assess your situation annually, take a look at where you are, and see, you know, what's your investment time horizon, like how long before you'll start needing to take the money out because of retirement, and what's your risk tolerance. Risk tolerance means how far down can the market go before you start losing sleep at night. So for example, back in March, I believe it was at the height of the market was at 29,000, and I believe that was February 19th. And from there, this is this year. And then when COVID hit, it pulled back dramatically and went down to 19,000 and has slowly crept back up. But at that point, that was quite a drop, and that happened in about 3 weeks. So what happens? How far does that have to go before you start losing sleep at night? That is your risk tolerance that we're talking about, and that's what you need to have assessed every single year. This very detailed little chart here looks like a patchwork quilt. It also looks like these periodic tables that we studied when we were in high school, but it's something that we think is actually really important. And without getting into much detail, I'm just going to share with you why we think this is important. This is every single year what the market has done within each of these asset classes. So when I say, you know, how much do you put in real estate? How much do you put in international? How much in bonds and whatever? This shows you year by year by year how each of these asset classes have performed. And the moral to this story is, if something has done really well one year, that doesn't mean it's going to do really well the next year. So that's the thing. You don't want to look at something and say, well, it did really well last year, I want to go into emerging markets. Well, look, this is in 2017, emerging markets, which is undeveloped countries, was the top performer in 2017. Man, that's awesome. Maybe I want to put everything in there. Well, in 2018, it was the worst performer. So that's the reason for diversification. A diversified portfolio includes all of these asset classes, and that's important for you to remember. The next question here is, what are you saving for? What are you investing for? And let's just say we have 3 buckets here. And one bucket would be, let's say this bucket right here is for short term, this medium and less than 2 years. This one is 2 to 5 years, and this one is more than 3 years. Then you would invest these differently. So for example, if you said, well, I'm saving, I'm going to buy a house in the next 2 years before the interest rates start going back up, well, then that would be this bucket, and you would want to keep that money very safe. You would not want to be having money, you know, solidly in equities that could do well, but it also could pull back in a couple of years, and you might lose some of that. So if you're going to use this within the next 2 years, then we're going to suggest that you keep this very safe in money markets, CDs, things like that. The second bucket right here, which would be an interim period, let's suppose that you're saving for college education or something like that. Well, then this one, if it's someone is like in middle school, then this one is going to be more conservative as well than this one. You're going to have it more in what we call fixed income, which is bonds. And then the third one here, this is when you have long-term investing, and you're looking for things like, I'm going to be saving for my retirement and whatnot. So in this particular case, you can afford, if you are years and years out, you can afford to start introducing equities in there, which are stocks. And how much? Again, it goes back to that investor profile that you would need to discuss with your investment advisor there. Just remember that for short-term, if you want less risk, you're going to have short-term investments. And if you are using long-term investments, it'll be bringing on more risk. Now, here's one that none of us really like talking about, but it's really important. And I have to say, here we are with this COVID, and we're facing, we're looking around here and seeing these people that would otherwise be healthy, and they're really struggling. We want to make sure that we keep all of our estate documents up to date. And that would include things such as your will, which your will or a trust would say where you want your assets to go. And in particular, things like your children. Who would be the guardians for your children if something happened to you? You want to be the one to make that decision. Another thing that's really important with your estate documents is making sure that you have medical directives. So if you have, for example, if something happened and you went on a ventilator, which heaven help anyone on this call would have that, but you know, we see it happening, then you want someone there to be able to make decisions on your behalf. And that would be what the medical directive is. So, you know, there are some amazing estate planning attorneys here in the state of Maryland. You can also get some of these online. I think they would do a much better job if you went person to person with someone who can see your individual situation. But if you were looking for, you know, just to punt kick this, I'd rather see you get something on the internet than to have nothing at all, because that's really going to be that critical. So those are all those issues that we've been talking about, guys. And I'm going to recap here. This is that same attachment that I was struggling with earlier. And I just want to recap this and make sure that we're all on the same page and we all understand what it is that you must do to get to that end line here that is so important to all of us. The first one is take an inventory of all your assets and liabilities. The second is determine how much you should be saving each year and where you put it. The third is evaluate your insurance needs. Do you need life insurance? Do you need disability insurance? Do you need long-term care insurance? The fourth, make sure you have up-to-date estate documents. You know, I have had clients come in literally that they show me their estate documents and their dog is in there, that if something happens, they want Charlie to go to, you know, Mike's parents, but their kids weren't in there, for example. So you need them to be up to date. The next one is to create a plan for the allocation of your investments. You have your investment account. How do you allocate it? And then finally, how do you, and finally, you must communicate regularly with your spouse or your partner about finances. So those are those kinds of questions that are really important for you to get there. These questions, and this is your end game right here. This is what we're looking for, guys. So what questions do you have that I can answer for you today?
So again, I'll just remind everybody, we have a chat box. If you hover over the screen with your mouse, at the bottom of the screen, there's a little bubble that says chat next to it. I know it takes a few minutes or a few seconds to actually type out the questions, so we might give the audience here a few minutes, but nothing has come in so far during the presentation.
And Clay, everybody, if you click, you can also unmute yourself. And if you would like to ask a question now instead of taking the time to type, that's great too. Katherine, thank you. It's so funny because I sit here and I look at Clay, and he just acquired a house a few weeks ago. He got married 3 years ago, I think, and maybe 2. Anyway, and so I look at him 3, and I look at where he is and where I am as, you know, I have forced myself for retirement to become part of my vocabulary. I knew if I said it enough times, it would come true. So I look at the spectrum, but to both of us, the information you provided, we're in totally different places, but both of us, there was information there that we just think about differently, but equally as important. So I appreciate, because I've got my steps, not all of those remaining steps that you've listed. Do I, have I got them all covered? So thank you for inspiring me to get my rear end in gear here. So.
Well, you know, I have to say, Angie, it's a rainy day out there, and this is, for me, this is the kind of day that I really hunker down with this kind of stuff. You know, I focus on things so well when it's this kind of a day. So it's a lot of information.
Yeah, your end photo is quite inspirational as well, where you began and end is inspirational, because I have to remind myself sometimes, why do I do this? It's the love of work and the love of people, but also it's the, I do want to have a good end game. So you've imparted a lot of great information. In your chat box, Katherine, are tons of thank yous, great presentation. And so Clay has recorded this. We will be sending it out to people. There is a request for any documents, whether it's that initial checklist, the ending checklist, anything you can send as part of your slide presentation. People are asking for that.
Okay. That's great.
And you do have a question.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess it's too late because my daughter is disabled and I should have taken out disability insurance. Not sure how I can help her at this late stage. She has Lyme disease and Social Security approved her after hiring an attorney. She's only 35 and has been sick since been sick since she was 26. Any help or any recommendations?
You know, I think that is tough, and what that illustrates is the importance of, you know, we all think this is not going to happen to us, and it does happen. It happens to it's happened in our family, and I'm so sorry that this has happened to your daughter. But I do think you would have a hard time getting disability insurance being approved at this point.
Yeah. Eric just made a comment that, you know, to encourage people to explore not just employer dependent in life insurance or retirement, and but to explore life insurance and retirement benefits outside your work. So
right, that's right. So that's right, and that would be, for example, you do your 401k, and then if you've maxed that out and you still have discretionary income, then you could then move over to the Roth IRA or the traditional IRA, or you could get life insurance that has a cash value. There are all kinds of ways to do this. I would encourage you not to forget, though, to first put that emergency account aside over here. Not an exciting account, but it's an important account, and that's and then to pay down any credit card debt that you guys have. Yeah. Elizabeth, am I missing anything?
Nope, you got it all. Good job.
All right.
Sorry, I had to.
Well, I want to thank you again, Katherine. It means so much. It's an honor to have Heritage Financial Consultants as an accredited business. And thank you for your leadership with BBB. Clay?
We have one more question from John. Oh. He's asking your opinion on cash value versus term life insurance. What's your opinion, Katherine?
Okay, so they're two totally different things. Cash value would be like a permanent life insurance policy versus a term life insurance. They would probably be used differently. So if you have someone that is, let's just say someone's 30 years old, just to make that number, and they have a young family, and they want to make sure they have insurance that sufficiently covers any of their expenses in case something happened to them, that would probably be a way to go for term because it is very cost effective. A permanent policy, such as a whole life or something like this, a variable universal life, they're all different kinds. Those can provide a cash value. And one of the good things about that is that not only will it provide a cash value that you could use during retirement, another resource, but there's no term to it. So it doesn't end at 30 years later, for example. It could go on, and you would have life insurance until you're 85 years old or whatever. You would have that. Now, having said that, it's noticeably more expensive. So we see people often understanding the value of that permanent / cash value, and that they may say, well, then let's do the bigger policy that covers all these important needs for a shorter period of time as term, but let's not forget about the permanent, and let's also purchase that, but let's do that with the intention of a longer term investment that can be building a value that you can use during retirement. It just depends on what the purpose is of your insurance need.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, again, Katherine, thank you. Many thanks to Heritage Financial, all the contributions. And with no more questions, this will conclude our webinar. And we do a follow-up. Please let us know what you thought of today's event, but also any needs you have as a business owner. You're not getting the seeing webinars elsewhere. We'd love to put these together. The one we had today and the ones we've actually had all along have been as a result of your voice through our surveys, letting us know what you need because you know the best. And we're here to try to pull that information with experts for you. So Katherine, thank you again. Thanks to everybody. Wish you a safe day today to yourself, your property, and so see you soon. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Katherine.
Bye.
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 Thanks.